Unalive by Daylight has 33 killers that have steadily released over the game's 7-year lifespan. New killer releases follow a straightforward formula now. They come out on the PTB, the DBD community then gives their input on whether the killer is well designed. Typically, this leads to the killer being either nerfed or ever so slightly buffed at release. That's because the modern DBD community is very scrutinizing of these new killers, especially when it comes to balance, analyzing every little single thing about them, which begs the question, what would happen if older DBD killers were released today? It goes without say that there are older killers on the roster that would cause Reddit forest fires for either being too weak or too strong if released today. But because they've been around for a while, they sort of get a free pass one way or the other. So in this video, we're going to be quickly going through every killer using this tier list that you can find in the description below, and I'll give my thoughts on how the DBD community would receive these killers if they were released today. We're going to act like the killers just came out on the PTB and deciding if they would make it to the live version of the game without the community demanding changes, or what changes they would demand. As someone who is frequently on Twitter these days, I'm an expert on the DBD community, so this should be easy, and make sure to let me know whether or not you agree with me as well. Starting with the Trapper. There's no way the DBD community would accept the Trapper how he is today. Needing to walk around the entire map to pick up his traps would be totally unacceptable. He would definitely be buffed to be able to reload his traps at lockers or something close to that. Next up is Wraith. I would say Wraith is the first killer that would probably get nerfed at launch, most likely in the way of add-on nerfs. I could definitely see Bone Clapper replacing Silent Bell as his iridescent. He'd be seen as sort of a new Skull Merchant type 3-gen killer, and the community would loathe him. Basically, his chase is too weak, but his gen defense is too good. Again, these aren't my opinions on the killer. This is how I think the DBD community would receive these killers if they released today. So keep that in mind. Wraith, nerfed. Hillbilly. Hillbilly, on the other hand, would be too weak. Since he's a new killer, people aren't even going to be aware he can curve, and even then he can easily end up being a punching bag. I could see something like low pros becoming base kit along with potentially a heavy add-on pass as well. And if we were lucky, behavior would even reduce the volume of his chainsaw so players wouldn't get permanent ear damage playing him. He would just basically be a weaker Bubba in the community's eyes if he released today. So Hillbilly gets a buff. Nurse. She would probably be the one that would cause the Reddit forest fires. There's a learning curve to Nurse for sure, but unlike Hillbilly, who relies on more of a unintended technical skill to curve, Nurse is very straightforward. People would learn her power pretty quickly, and she would get hard nerfed at launch in the way of something like Oni, where she would need to earn blinks. To that point, I actually could see an entire rework taking place. At what point does such an enormous nerf basically count as a rework? But yeah, there's no way she's accepted by the current community, so Nurse is going to be our first killer that I say gets reworked. Oh yeah, Myers. Now Myers gets a bit of a star pass because he's such a popular killer that people are going to love playing against him pretty much no matter what. That said, DBD is an esport now, and some things have become unacceptable in the never-ending pursuit for perfect balance. So it's with that, I'd say Myers would probably have add-on nerfs at launch. Most notably, Tombstone Piece would be removed completely. I know, Sag, or not, depending on who you are. So Myers gets the nerf. Hag. Oh god. The community would hate this killer so much if she was released today. The interesting thing is though, is you can't really nerf Hag. She just is what she is, or you basically ruin her. For that reason, and judging how the community evaluates new killers, I'd say Hag released today would have to get a full rework. Let me know if you disagree, but Hag, rework, no hope. Doctor. Now, I don't think there would be a lot of complaining about the Doctor being too weak or too strong, but there would be complaining that the killer is annoying or maybe boring. which is kind of sad as Doctor still has some of the more interesting playstyles available besides just being optimal. All that said, I would say that Doctor is the first killer that would make it to the live version of the game with no balance changes. Hooray for Doctor. Huntress. This one would be a bit of a battle because killer players love Huntress, but survivor players wouldn't be so keen on letting her go untouched. I can already see it. There would be an endless stream of clips being posted to Twitter, Reddit, and everywhere else of her hatchets hitting survivors around corners and over objects. They would be foaming about the hitbox size of the hatchets, and they would probably end up having them reduced. The irony is that really good Huntress mains would probably make survivors regret that decision down the line, but that's how I see her release going today. So Hunchy gets nerfed. Leatherface. With the anti-camping mechanic being added to the game now, it actually puts Bubba in a position to not be nerfed immediately. He can still camp basement somewhat successfully, but not enough to justify any kind of nerf. I think he would actually be well received by both killers and survivors, although I might be a bit biased here because Bubba is currently the killer I enjoy playing the most both as and against. But I'm gonna say, like Doctor, Bubba gets no changes. Freddy. He would probably be received somewhat closely to how Singularity was. A lot going on, but it all pretty much amounts to nothing. Not too strong, not too weak, and since milquetoast doesn't really seem to be a concern when it comes to the community right now, chances are he wouldn't be changed. So I'm gonna say Freddy, no change. Milquetoast. The Pig. I would say definite add-on nerfs for the Pig with a small chance for dash buffs, but probably not. But yeah, the add-ons that decrease head trap death timers would be sliced down for sure, if not entirely removed. Having RNG like that in modern DBD has become unacceptable. It could risk ruining someone's 539th win in a row. So, I'm sorry guys, but that said, Pig gets nerfed, obviously. Clown. Easy. Pinky finger removed 100%. There's no way this add-on stays in modern DBD. It would become something like after hitting a survivor directly with a bottle, the clown's movement speed is increased by 5% for 10 seconds. Remember, milquetoast balancing. Nothing too interesting is allowed. Not that I like Pinky Finger, it is a really annoying add-on for sure, but still no creativity when it comes to balance, or you're fired. So, Clown, enjoy your nerf. Pinky Finger scrub. Spirit. In her current state, she would probably slip by without being totally gutted, but there would, of course, be changes. First, her add-ons that alter the variables of her power speed and recharge would most likely be removed completely or changed. And lastly, her lunge attack out of phase would no longer count as a basic attack, which I believe it does right now. Correct me if I'm wrong. It would become a special attack for sure. So Spirit, she gets a mini nerf. Just a mini nerf. Legion, oh boy. Let me say that Legion mains are very lucky to have this character, because if Legion was released today, I'm pretty confident that they would get hard nerfed, especially when it comes to add-ons. Never Sleep Pills and Eerie Button would be gone 100% for sure. I also wouldn't be surprised if they added a new survivor item on the map to heal faster or to avoid Killer Instinct altogether. I wouldn't call it a rework, but definitely a hard nerf bordering on a rework. Legion is a very polarizing character because the really good players kind of like playing against him, but like if you're not a really good player, it's a disaster. So still, I say nerf in modern DBD if released today. Next up is Plague, and she's not all that different from Legion in some ways, but you guessed it, she would get changes. She's one of the best proxy campers in the game because her corrupt splooge is not only super deadly, but the survivors are generally all injured, making unhooks incredibly difficult. So maybe no corrupt splooge next to hook survivors. Likewise, she has some pretty heavy duty add-ons, so those would get gutted or reworked as well. Lastly, survivors typically get very low points playing against her, which often makes them give up on first hook, so behavior would probably be forced to address that as well. So like Legion, Plague gets the nerf. Ghostface. There would be some calls for nerfs because a Ghostface who is good at marking is considered to be boring, but I don't think there would be enough complaints in either direction to get Ghostface changed. Ghostface is a goofy killer. You either love him or you hate him, but even most sweat lords are embarrassed to publicly complain about Ghostface and his somewhat goofy mechanics. I'm gonna say that Ghostface would go to live with no changes. Deme. Now, I already made an entire video about how Demogorgon has been largely power crept by other killers, making him way less desirable to play as. Now, I don't think Demo is awful or anything, but he needs to have more of an identity, and I think the community would agree if he was released today. He needs a lot of small quality of life improvements, like maybe faster portals, faster teleporting, less information given to the survivors, more stealth, shred inflicting hemorrhage or maybe mangled. Things like that would make Demo feel way better to play, which is his biggest problem. He doesn't really feel that satisfying to play anymore unless you're a die-hard Demo main, so I would say Demo definitely gets buffs. Oni. I have to be honest, I don't think Oni would really get touched or even complained about too much. Oni has some techs that he can do that players might have a problem with down the line, but at launch, I think Oni would make it as is. Does that make Oni the most well-balanced killer in the game for both sides? Maybe. Let me know what you think. I really have nothing to say that interesting about Oni. He's a very well-designed killer. So, Oni goes to live with no change. Deathslinger. Now, the only really annoying thing that Deathslinger can do is camp, and a lot of them do for sure, but with the anti-camping update out, I don't think there's really anything left to hate on Slinger for except maybe a strong ability to tunnel or proxy, but if played right, that's pretty much a guaranteed loss if the survivors are decent enough. So I would also have to say that Slinger, as he is right now, would not be changed at launch. Bang. Pyramid Head. And now he has had a lot of nerfs since he was originally released for the better, but the current Pyramid Head still has absolutely worthless add-ons except for range. Like, they are all incredibly worthless and boring, so I would say Pyramid Head gets an add-on pass, which would be a buff in this case. Even if it's behavior style and they increase an add-on value by literally 0.1%, it's still a buff, and Pyramid Head needs it desperately because he's awesome, but his add-ons make him repetitive to play. So Pyramid Head actually gets a buff. Blight, oh man. Blight in Modern Sweaty DVD at launch with his current add-ons, no chance they would stay in. His add-ons would get trash canned, and rightfully so. Blight is almost an offensive character because he's actually really fun to play against, but with the busted add-ons, it just becomes a single player game on narrative difficulty, so definitely a nerf for Blight. The twins. Now, unfortunately, I have to give you all some bad news. The devs actually lost the source code to twins, and they just haven't had the courage to admit it publicly yet. The rework is never coming, and it's also the same reason she would have no changes at launch, because they simply can't, as there is no source code to change. It's lost somewhere in the spaghetti coding, and after Patrick went missing looking for it, it's too dangerous to commit any more resources to, so Twins gets no changes ever. Trickster. Some people loathe playing against Trickster, so I think it's most likely his eerie photo card would be nerfed at launch. Like Clown, it's just a bit too easily abusable for the current sweaty environment of DBD. Outside of that, I don't see any other changes happening. You can hate Trickster as much as you want, but his design doesn't warrant a rework. So Trickster goes to live nerfed. Bro. Nemesis. Now I think Nemesis is a very well-rounded killer personally. The only small complaints would be that his add-ons leave a bit to be desired, but I actually believe he would release in a mostly positive light in the community's eyes with no changes. As worthless as some of his add-ons are, there's still enough variety there for launch. If you get wrecked by a Nemesis in a chase, that's definitely a you problem. I guarantee that Nemesis is very loopable if you know what you're doing. And I just don't see that enough people in the community would have a problem with him. So Nemi goes to live as is. Pinhead. Oof. Pinhead would be a disaster if released today. He came out with skill-based matchmaking, and that's probably the only reason he wasn't nuked at launch. He's a total pub stomper, yet Survive with Friends counters him, but he counters Survive with Friends with his best add-ons, which also makes him even more of a pub stomper if not playing against a Survive with Friends. That made sense. So I'd predict that his Eerie Lamet add-on would get hard nerfed into the ground, and survivors solving the box would no longer get harassed by chains while solving it during a chain hunt. This would make him way weaker overall, but I don't see any way around it, as people hate playing against this killer, especially solo queue players, and to be fair, they kind of have a reason to. So with that said, if Pinhead released today with skill-based matchmaking in the game, in the current state of everything, definitely hard nerf. Artist. Maybe not the most loved killer, but I don't see either side complaining for buffs or nerfs when it comes to Artist. She's very peanut butter and jelly balance-wise, so I'm gonna quickly say that Artist would make it to the live version pretty smoothly. Some people might not even know she was ever released. Sadako. Now, Sadako, she's an interesting one because people have a lot of built-in feelings about her, but if she was fresh released today and nobody had ever played against her or as her before, there would be a lot of different perceptions about her kit. I'm gonna say that she would get nerfed, and probably in the form of it being less punishing for survivors to get hit while holding a tape. Not because it's unbalanced, but because there would be too many videos on YouTube of people creaming their pants in the thumbnail, screaming how OP she is in the PTB when you play against potatoes who have no idea how to counter her. So with that, I'm sorry Sadako, but you would be nerfed and then probably buffed down the line once people realized holding a tape is really all you need to do. Sadako gets the nerf. Dredge. Now, Dredge is pretty much perfectly balanced in my opinion. Everything is right where it should be. His map reliance can be a bit painful sometimes with locker placements, but the opposite can also be true. So I wouldn't see that the community wants any changes for Slurpee. The community really always loved this killer, and for good reason. Dredge is really one of the best killers that's ever come to DPD. He's creepy, he's fun to play, and he's fun to play against, so he's kind of the perfect package. Dredge goes to live with no changes. Yeah. Wesker. Now, I think Wesker is a bit too rewarded for tunneling if he runs the right add-ons, but at the end of the day, Wesker is considered to be the most fun killer in the game to play as and play against. In fact, by far the largest complaint about Wesker is that he's so fun that he's become overplayed, sucking up all the variety in the game. Now, I have to say he's been a bit framed here because he was the last well-designed killer for nearly a year. That said, there would be some nerf to his infection promoting tunneling if he was released today. I don't know in what form it would come in. It could be add-on nerfs, no disease spread until a conspicuous action has been suggested, or a flat-out change to what his infection actually does when it's full. Maybe they would just remove the hindered effect altogether or put 2 stages to the infection. I don't have any idea, but definitely something would be done to discourage Wesker from tunneling survivors. So Wesker gets the nerf. The Knight. Okay, would he be nerfed if released in his current state? I don't actually believe so. The only criticism the Knight gets is that he should be deleted from the game entirely, which isn't really criticism, it's just counterproductive. So he'd stay how he is now because there's really no other option. People would be pissy about it for sure, but you can't really rework his power as they put too much effort into it. This is why it's really important for behavior to think about these things at a conceptual stage before they actually start developing them, because afterwards it's too late and then you have something like Knight going to release at launch with no changer. Speaking of not thinking about things at the conceptual stage, we have Skull Merchant. I know, hide your kids. With Skull Merchant, we don't really have to speculate anymore. We literally just got the reworked version. Now that said, if you were intentionally going into matches with the old Skull Merchant to hold the 3-gen for as long as possible, you are probably a psychopath, but luckily we don't have to worry about that any longer. She's out. She looks kind of interesting to play. I honestly can't say for sure though, because I'm in the middle of getting my last chemo cycles, and I don't have the energy to play a killer that requires brain cells at the moment, or at least give them a fair analysis. So by default, she goes into the would release as is because she just did, obviously. Then we have Singularity. Now Singularity can be decently strong in the right hands, and survivors don't mind playing against him, so according to the community, he's a very well made killer that needs no changes. That said, I completely disagree. I think his power is extremely underwhelming. He's the master of nothing and needs something more in my opinion. He's basically a perk build with a teleport, and he takes way too much brain capacity to accomplish minuscule tasks. That said, this is how the DBD community would receive these killers, not me, and it looks like they love Daddy Milquetoast just the way he is. I'll admit though, his Mori is still pretty epic. So Singularity gets no changes. Lastly, we have the Xenomorph, who was slightly buffed from the PTB, only to be basically immediately nerfed back to the PTB version, where basically the killer is punished if they miss their tail attack. Personally, I'll always have the opinion that they kinda dropped the ball with the Xenomorph. It's not a bad chapter, it just feels like they played it way too safe with the power and didn't take full advantage of the IP in my opinion. Again though, we already know the answer here, which is that Alien would go to live as is. Which in the end means more killers actually would go to the live version of the game unchanged than getting nerfed, unless you count the reworks and buffs. Alrighty, there you have it. Do you agree with my assessment? Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the link to make your own list is in the description below. Feel free to shoot me your version over on my Twitter or X or whatever it's called now, or go ahead and write out the entire thing in the comments if you're insane. And as always, thanks for watching and have a good one.